What exactly did George W. Bush do to get us into this recession? It just stated and accepted that Bush gave us the recession that we're in. Obama inherited a recession. And when he got into office, he found that it was much worse than he had been told, much worse than he realized, much worse than he imagined. So what exactly did George W. Bush do to get us into this recession? Fight 2 wars? Well, we're already fighting 2 wars, and we still are. So fighting 2 wars, is that what he did? How about 4 wars? I mean, George Bush had us in 2. Now we are in 4 wars. Did George W. Bush cut taxes? Is that what gave us the recession? Well, Obama extended the Bush tax cuts last December. So what exactly has Bush done, or what did he do that created this recession? Did Bush increase federal spending too much? Now, he did spend a lot, but whatever Bush spent, Obama's quadrupled it. If what Bush did was so terrible, this is my point. If what Bush did was so terrible, and if what Bush did gave us this recession, how come Obama doubling down on what Bush did is somehow going to get us out of it? Now, we all know why we're in this circumstance. It's in that book. And you didn't even need to read the book, folks. I mean, you should. Book that I have told you about, Reckless Endangerment, How Outsized Ambition, Greed, and Corruption Led to Economic Armageddon. It's the housing crisis that led us here, the subprime situation, and all of the derivatives and ancillaries that flow from it, Fannie Mae, Countrywide, Angelo Mozilla, all of this is traceable to that. And that's traceable to Bill Clinton, as this book makes clear. And as we now know, and it's also in this book, it was the Bush administration which tried to regulate this out of existence, meaning the problem. Bush tried to stop this. And Barney Frank and the Democrats basically ate those regulators up, chewed them up, and spat them out in the midst of hearings. We know what led to this recession. It was nationwide lending of money to people who had no way of paying back their loans. And the big question that everybody's always asked me, well, Rush, how did they make money then? How in the world did all these banks make money lending money, giving mortgages to people who couldn't pay it back? It's an excellent question. And I, of course, El Rushbo, have the answer. The banks were up against it. The banks have been accused of predatory lending, and in some instances, the Wall Street bankers, very powerful Wall Street bankers, were indeed in bed with Jim Johnson over at Fannie Mae, and with Clinton, and then with Obama. Crony capitalism, what have you. But Janet Reno's on record as threatening banks with massive investigations if they did not continue to make these loans under the Community Redevelopment Act, or whatever it was called. But the question is, okay, so you're loaning money to people who can't pay it back. Where in the world is the profit in that? If nobody can service the loan, they can't pay it back, how do you make any money? Good question. Here's how it happened. All of these mortgages, which were required to be made, were sitting there as individual mortgages, worthless. So what happened, as simply as I can explain this, is that in the public sector, and then there was a first instance of this in the private sector. I forget the name of the bank. The book mentions it. These mortgages were pooled. All of these disparate mortgages were pooled into one bundle, or a series of large bundles. You need to say a security, a mortgage-backed security of, say, $130 million. Okay, but I still don't understand, Rush. If you got $130 million total mortgages and nobody can pay them back, how do you make any money? Well, you sell the mortgages to Fannie Mae, which is a government-sponsored enterprise, which is ostensibly a private sector enterprise with government ties. But the way it worked was this. When the government's involved, nobody loses money. The government's good for anything. If somebody blows up, the government bail them out. Fannie Mae will take care of it, and that's what happened. They package these, from the standpoint of the bankers, they knew that they were sitting on worthless paper, all of these loans and mortgages. So they try to come up with ways to make it profitable. So they package these bundles, these pools of mortgages, call it a security, and then they sell this to the unwitting. Just like the unwitting buy lemons, the unwitting buy all kinds of stupid stuff. You go out and you package these mortgages and you promise this giant income stream. You say, by the way, it's backed by the federal government, no sweat here. And you pass it on to investors. And then each series of investors at some point realizes they've bought a bunch of goods, worthless paper. And at each stage, the latest crew of investors realizing they've been taken tries to come up with a new way of monetizing these things so that they're worth something and they can sell them to somebody else. And that kept happening until everybody knew what was going on and there was no money there. The only thing that could happen was constant, continual bailouts of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. There never was any real income associated with these things. Yet the people who pooled them and packaged them and sold them made out like bandits selling worthless paper. The people at the tail end of this are the ones that got stung, just like the bondholders at Chrysler got stung in the government takeover. The bondholders at GM got stung in the government takeover. They were the ones told they were greedy in wanting their money back. So that's how people made money. They didn't make money on the mortgages themselves. They didn't make any money on people paying off the loans. There was no income stream from all these people who were incapable of paying the loan because they were never qualified. The income came from pooling or packaging, selling these mortgage-backed securities to the unwitting, who, by the way, never knew they were unwitting. I mean, these were not doofuses. These were equally smart people. And at the end of the day and all of this stuff, well, it's all backed by the government. Eventually, this is all going to be made whole. And the government's backing all this up. The government's behind it. Magic words. And if the government bails anybody out once, you figure it'll happen again, which is the problem with bailouts. But then the government decided not to bail out Bear Stearns. They decided to let Bear Stearns go belly up, and that is when abject panic set in. Hello, TARP. Hello, money to make all of this worth something, because it was totally worthless. The subprime, all of these packaged pools of mortgages were worthless from the get-go. You had Democrat Party social justice, social policy, the American dream being realized by more and more people, the Democrat Party getting credit for making homeownership possible. You had racial tensions here by getting rid of the redlining practices. It was all made to order for everything Democrats. They could benefit having people in homes that could no longer or never pay for them. Let it be known it was a Democrat Party that made that possible. And then when, as it always does in anything like that, when there's no money in something, eventually the Madoff Ponzi scheme is exposed. Social Security Ponzi scheme is going to be exposed the same way. Medicare Ponzi scheme is going to be exposed the same way. At that point, what happened is that Hank Paulson and the boys said, you know what, I can't let my boys on Wall Street eat this. So we're going to go in there and we'll make this massive claim for TARP money, $700 billion, and we'll say that we got to do this to save the entire financial system of the world, not just the country, but the world. And we'll do this right during the presidential campaign. And it worked well. McCain suspends his campaign to deal with the crisis. Obama takes over the meeting. McCain effectively ends his chances along with ending his campaign. The money comes forward. Bush is involved too. He's read the Riot Act. He said, if you don't do this, I remember I had to go appear at a function, and there happened to be a couple U.S. senators there. in the midst of all this. And I asked him, is this financial system really? Oh, yeah, Rush, it's worse than even what you've heard. It is, really? Yeah, it's horrible out there. Yeah, we had to do this TARP thing. If we hadn't done this, I shut it right. There might not be a U.S. financial system right now. And I said, well, the only problem with that is they told us that, and they said we had 24 hours. And it was voted down at first. It took 2-3 weeks for the TARP thing to actually get funded and voted on and passed. How do we survive those 2 to 3 weeks? Well, we survived because people knew the money would eventually be coming. It was really bad out there, right? When it wasn't. Well, it was, but it was a scheme to make whole all these people who had acted under government orders, to make loans to people who couldn't pay them back. How do we make them whole again? Well, we'll just bail them out. Fed will print some money. Remember, up to this point, too, the Fed had already printed and lent $2 trillion to others at that time. They wouldn't tell us to whom. So, tell me again what Bush did to cause this recession? And that's the point of all this. What did Bush do to cause the recession? And that's Gibbs's point, it's the Democrats' point, it's Obama's point. Yeah, well, Democrats, the only ones that can save us. Republicans drove the car in a ditch, a Bush recession. Well, what exactly was the Bush recession? What did he do to get us into this? Fight 2 wars? Fine, we're fighting 4 now. Cut taxes? Well, Obama extended the tax cuts, the Bush tax cuts, last December. Did Bush engage in too much federal spending? Well, yeah, and Obama's quadrupled it. Whatever Bush did, Obama's doubled down and multiplied it 3 or 4 times, and yet Bush did all this? Obama just doubling down on what he claims got us into the recession. He tripled down on us, if you will. In many ways, the housing collapse was a lot like the savings and loan crisis in the 80s. People were making money on bad loans because they knew they had government as their ultimate backstop. Until the guys at the very end of the trail. And that's when it required, when you couldn't find any more suckers to buy the bad paper. Like a pyramid scheme, when you couldn't find any more suckers to buy the bad paper. Hello, TARP. Hello, government bailing everybody out. That's what it was. Under the guise of saving the U.S. financial system. And what it was, I joked at the time that what Paulson was doing was making sure his Wall Street buddies held on to their homes in the Hamptons. And I was closer to being right than I even knew at the time.